Did you have a question, Sandy?
I do. I was thinking in terms of the work that many of us are doing that are involved in schools or in working with youth quite often who are high school age, perhaps, just as the group that I know a number of us are focused on, and younger, how to think of applying some of what you've said in either the school environment or the community organization environment or collaborations where there can still be some kind of ready support without necessarily the idea of going off-site or totally separating, how there's room to think about that.
Yeah, you know, there's lots of possibilities there. You know, the community can come together and co-create rites of passage for young people anywhere, anytime, basically. Basically, all they need is, first of all, the understanding of what they're doing. Ideally, they themselves would seek out initiation so that they would know firsthand what it is that they're offering to the young people themselves. Because it can be problematic to have uninitiated people doing initiation. But that said, you know, there's a lot that you can do. And in fact, there's a wonderful man that I know who works in outside of LA, and he works with school districts. One of the things that he does, he usually works with kids sort of 5th through 8th grade, and he worked with a school in Topanga Canyon. And they got the parents together, and they got the administrators together, and they all sort of sat down and figured out what is something that is going to serve as a rite of passage for these young people. And they came up with a very unusual solution: surfing. Many of these young people had not spent a whole lot of time in the ocean, even though it's 10 miles away, much less gotten out on a surfboard, and had tremendous fear, many of them, about doing it. So they got some older surfers together, and they took them out in the ocean, and they taught them how to surf. That can sometimes provide the transformational impact that you need. Sometimes not. It depends on the young person. But it doesn't have to be some airy-fairy weird thing that happens out in the wilderness. You know, there's amazing things that are happening in school districts across the country right now. Yeah.
How do you deal with teens who are having problems outside of school and they don't want to talk about it? Like, they have problems at home, they have problems in the street, and they have that, how would you say, low self-esteem, and have that, excuse my language, but that bucket attitude, you know? Mm-hmm. How would you outreach to them? Because it's easier said than done to go through all these exercises and not mean it, and then get out of it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm changed, but they don't even mean about it.
Yeah. You know, it's a great question. And we live in a society that's very sort of rights-oriented, right? So everybody talks about, well, I have my rights, and these are my rights, and you can't violate my rights. That's fine. That's needed. And, you know, traditional peoples around the planet were much more focused on responsibilities than they were on rights. They recognized as elders, just like the quote at the beginning of the trailer, I don't know if you were in the room for it, that if we do not initiate the young, they will burn down the village to feel the heat. Okay? They recognized the community was at risk if they didn't accept the responsibility of initiating the young people. So the bottom line is those young people didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice. They were taken, like you see, again, you might have missed it, but the animated scene at the beginning of the film, the elders sometimes would show up in the middle of the night and yank the boys out of the mother's hut. You're coming with us. We're going to teach you what it is to be a man. You say you want to be a man? Great. We're going to show you what that looks like. So it's tricky in today's society, you know, because of all of the right stuff. In an ideal world, the community would show up and take the young people, and that would be it. Now, we do have to do a lot of convincing as best we can to get buy-in from the young person. And admittedly, it is difficult because if you don't get that buy-in, and I've seen this many times, I've been on a lot of these kinds of things, you'll just get pushback. You'll get that fuck you all weekend long from the young person, right? And they'll resist, resist, resist. Maybe something will happen and they'll, their heart will be opened and awakened in some way. I've seen that too, even despite all the pushing back. So you never quite know, but it is difficult. It's a problem. Yeah.
Most of what you've talked about is a group situation. Would you contrast group and individual in terms of rite of passage?
That's a really interesting question too. Could you all hear it? Could you all hear his question? How do you contrast a group situation versus individual? I've asked myself that question a lot when it came to our men's work, with the Mankind Project. What would you do, for example, if you had a celebrity, say a Tom Cruise, say he wants to do this weekend. How could you have him do the weekend and still get the impact of it, but preserve confidentiality? Because that's absolutely essential too. So I haven't gotten an answer, but one of the things that I will tell you is I think that it's essential that it happen in a group, that you can't do it alone, because the very meaning of that transformation has to be about understanding how the other men on the planet are your brothers, and the other women on the planet are your sisters, and that we're all interdependent. So it's very, very difficult to learn that lesson alone, and it's possible. Even like the Native American Vision Quest, for example. I mean, when you're sitting up for 3 days and nights fasting and praying on a hill somewhere, that is alone. But it's only alone during that ordeal. The beginning and the end, you're with community. So before you're set off, you're in a sweat lodge with others, and you have elders who are basically guiding you. And then at the end, when you're welcome home, you also have elders. And one of the things I haven't mentioned, which I really should, part of the reason why I focus so much on rites of passage is because it's so deeply misunderstood in our society. But mentorship is half of the equation. To me, they're two halves of one whole. You have to have mentorship before, during, and after a rite of passage. Beforehand, because you have to get the young person ready to accept the challenges that they're going to face, psychologically, emotionally prepared as best as possible, and you have to build that relationship of trust so that they really trust you. Then during, you have to be there as a kind of a touchstone, if nothing else, so that they feel grounded. They feel like they're on track when they see you, the mentor. And then afterwards is perhaps most important, because after this peak experience, you need to have that mentor there who helps you integrate the lessons. And it takes months and sometimes years to integrate what you've learned. That's what the mentor is for. So how do I put all this into practice, right? How do I be accountable? How do I be in integrity? How do I work my emotional life? How do I live my mission? All of that, the mentor has to be there to help you sort that out. Any other questions? Yes?
How about the idea that our culture is fragmented? So some of these rites of passages, emanate or come out of a cultural experience or what's accepted within that group of people.
Mm-hmm.
So we seem to have a fragmented culture. We have so many different people, so many different, things that tearing you apart. So you don't have the single place you're coming from.
Yes.
With the expectations of what it is to grow up. So
yes.
I was wondering if you'd comment.
It's a problem. It's a problem. And, it's something that, I work with a lot of different rites of passage organizations, and they recognize that they are perhaps doing a young person a deep, deep disservice by offering them an initiatory experience and then dropping them back into the very same dysfunctional environment they came from. So if they don't have those strong mentoring relationships built up to sustain the young people after this initiation, they could possibly do them more harm than good. It's a problem. But you know, we can't wait. Well, and part of the purpose of the film, I'll back up a second and say, you know, it's actually directed at adults. It's directed at most of the people who are your age. It's not directed at the teens. I want to motivate the policymakers, the change makers, the community makers to step up, accept their responsibilities to young people, and to start to build these containers to offer them safe passage through it. But we can't wait until we repair every community on the planet. They are broken. There's no question. They are broken. But we can offer mentoring relationships, deep one-on-one relationships, before, during, and after rites of passage, and these powerful experiences. And it's needed. Yes.
What's your opinion on the possibility of someone younger building a rites of passage container, and say someone who wants to be initiated into elderhood decides that that's important to them? What's around the age difference there if someone younger is initiated? What's your opinion around that?
You mean somebody, give me a concrete example. Somebody like 12 wants to have an initiation?
No, but say I'm taking on this work in my community and I'm leading the way with the language and developing programs, but somebody who might be 40 or 50 says, I was never initiated in this way and I would like to do that. What's your opinion on me facilitating them through that process?
You know, that's a great question. I mean, at some level, you have to be the judge. You know, do I have what it takes to hold a container, to build and hold a container? Yes, it's true that peers cannot initiate peers. You know, you do need to have some age difference there. It doesn't have to be 80-year-olds, though, and 20-year-olds. But, you know, you do have to have some elders there. So I would just say invite them into your process. Find older men and women that you trust and say, I want your wisdom and guidance in helping me to build this. But they have to be true elders, which is to say they have to carry and embody some real wisdom. They're not just older folks, you know, because frankly, a lot of our older folks, again, are suspended adolescents. They may be 60, 70, 80 years old, but they're still about me, right? They have to be in that place of us, us, us. Yeah.
Could you imagine a systematic approach to creating a rites of passage process where it's not just perhaps a small nonprofit amidst a community of institutions, but the institutions themselves offering a process that really is inclusive of all of those communities' youth?
Yeah, well, you know, it's happening. It's already happening. I mean, there's a wonderful group in Santa Rosa called Community Matters. And officially, they're an anti-bullying group for schools. But unofficially, I think of them as a kind of a rite of passage mentorship organization. They offer young people in school settings a kind of equivalent of a rite of passage. And they're actually they're already reforming school cultures around the country. They have a beautiful way of doing it too, because basically the way that they work is they work with school administrators to identify key influencers in the school student population. So they'll take particular kids who are leaders in all the different cliques, you know, and then they'll get them all in a room together, however many, 20, 30, 40 kids. And then they first of all teach them about, you know, the impact of bullying, and give them kind of an emotional, heart-opening experience about its real cost, so that they sort of get on board, and then they empower them to be the enforcers, if you will, of school-wide cultural changes. And they are doing an amazing job in reforming whole cultures of schools. So, and that's just one example. But there are others out there. Yeah.
I was just participating in some of the Transition Town workshops. I'm wondering, this might not be a question, but what the rites of passage movement, such as Transition Town, how that might look. Kind of exciting to think about.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Again, communities can co-create rites of passage forms that are culturally, geographically specific. So I just was in Hawaii a month and a half ago visiting Kalani Souza, who's a native Hawaiian man. They actually got some FEMA money to restore trails on the Big Island of Hawaii. And they're going to use this money to basically train young people in emergency preparedness. But they're going to do it from a framework of rite of passage, basically. So they're going to set up trials for them to actually cook them a little bit through this whole process while they're training them. And then while they're getting them out on the trails to cut and clear and do whatever else they do. So there'll be physical trials, there'll be intellectual trials, learning new skills, etc. So the key thing from my perspective, I mean, there's so much beautiful work already being done around the country by youth development organizations and others. Partly what I think I'm offering here is simply a reframe, to big brothers, big sisters, to outward bound. It's like just conceive of the work you're doing in a slightly different way and then approach it so that it has that much more impact and force, and you can really initiate young people. And if it's not already clear, let me just say it. I'm not beholden in any way, shape, and form to any given model. There's so many beautiful models across the planet. I just want people to enact it.
I'm just wondering about, I think of like rite of passage as more of like a process, and it seems like you're more focused on like a specific one-time thing. So could you talk about that a little bit?
I appreciate that, and I guess the answer is no. Because, I get it. I give that impression sometimes that it can be a single event. And it can be, but it doesn't have to be. One of the people I can't wait to film for my film is a rabbi in Philadelphia, Rabbi Goldie Milgram. She's doing beautiful bar and bat mitzvah work with young people. Unlike a lot of other rabbis in the country, her point of view is that a lot of the practice of bar and bat mitzvah has been totally co-opted by consumer culture. It carries no transformational capacity anymore. So what she does up to 2 years of service, trials, and rituals with young people before they ever get to study the Torah and get up in front of the community. So that's kind of the culminating event. But she'll have them working in soup kitchens, she'll have them out cleaning the streets of neighborhoods. She puts them through service and trials in all kinds of different ways to grow them, to really cook them a while first. So the answer is it's both. It doesn't have to be a kind of a peak experience over, say, 48 or 72 hours.
Well, first, thank you for this piece. Let's just start with that.
Thank you.